What's up, Sanisa Superbad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Per tweet from Michael Benson, Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz is reportedly moving from October 24th to October 31st. We talked about that in my previous video, and it's so that it can happen at the Alamo Dome in Texas with around, get this, 11,500 fans there. This also means it will no longer clash with the Khabib versus Gaethje UFC pay-per-view. And I have to correct myself, at least on one aspect of this story. When this news first broke, that there might be some fans allowed to be in attendance for this match, I didn't imagine that it would be to a huge crowd, 20,000, 15,000, 10,000. I figured if they're going to have fans in attendance, maybe it'll be a small group, maybe about 5,000. But this is encouraging. 11,500 people will be allowed to be in attendance for this match. Now, this is not a match that I'm interested in. My feelings there, they really haven't changed. And I stand by my original assertion that, for the most part, the people at the PBC and the TMT don't want to go head-to-head with that UFC card, with that Khabib versus Gaethje fight that's set to go down on the 24th.
No, sir.
They don't need any of the fight fans out there, the hybrid fans who take in both mixed martial arts and boxing, being distracted by that Khabib versus Gaethje card. They got a lot riding on this fight, and this is Gervonta Davis' big pay-per-view debut, and they need as many eyes, as many ears, and as many buys as they can get. In that situation, they'd rather go head-to-head with that Inoue versus Maloney card because this is set to be Inoue's U.S. debut and his top-ranked debut. I'll say that even though this is not a fight that I'm excited about, it still is very encouraging to hear that this many fans could be in attendance as we transition out of this pandemic, this global pandemic that has brought most everything, including the sport of boxing, to a screeching halt for a time. I'll say that it's very encouraging that we're seeing this return to some normalcy, that as many as 11,500 fans could be in attendance for this thing. Now, whether or not they'll reach that number, whether or not it will be a capacity crowd in that capacity, has yet to be determined. I'll tell you that as a boxing fan who's followed the sport for many years, I'm actually more interested in the Inoue versus Maloney card, because on that card, Michaela Mayer is going to be challenging Eva Brotnicka for the WBO title, and I am far more interested with that and in that than I am watching Gervonta Davis fight Leo Santa Cruz. Those are two guys who, as far as I'm concerned, should be fighting other people, as there would be more intrigue if they were. Them fighting each other seems to me like a means to isolate themselves from everyone else. Everyone at 130 and everyone at 135. Everyone who's with a different promotional outfit fighting on a different platform. When I look at this fight, that's all I see. That rather than allowing Gervonta Davis to take on the best and brightest fighters at 135 pounds, that's too much of a crapshoot for their matchmakers. So what they'll do is conjure up a familiar little guy for Gervonta Davis to fight. In that way, I'm not the least bit interested in this match. And given the price tag that comes with it, I'll be watching that Inoue versus Maloney card.
Of course, I didn't ask to see Davis versus Santa Cruz.
In truth, I don't think anybody did. I think that this was a fight that was force-fed to the boxing fans by way of Leonard Ellerbe and his constant assertions that Gervonta Davis is a pay-per-view star. Well, we'll see how much of a star he is or how much of a star he ain't based on the pay-per-view buys and now the live gate revenue. Although I must add that if the numbers are encouraging, let's not pretend that these guys aren't following a certain formula. The same formula they used when Errol Spence locked horns with a little guy in Mikey Garcia. What they're hoping is that the Chicano fans will show up and show out to support a fighter of Mexican descent. You think it's a coincidence that this thing is happening at the Alamo Dome in Texas, where there are a large number of Chicanos?
That is who they're hoping buys those tickets.
That is who they're hoping shows up at the live gate. And if it happens that way, it wouldn't have been Gervonta Davis's quote-unquote star power that sold this thing, rather Leo Santa Cruz's Chicano fans, assuming it does well at the live gate and on pay-per-view, and to be honest, I'm not sure that it will. Myself, I'm not the least bit interested in this fight, and I've been very vocal about that since its inception. Thus, I've no intention of forking over 80 of my dollars to see it, not when I can watch Mayer versus Brotnica and Inouye versus Maloney as part of my ESPN Plus monthly subscription. That doesn't cost me an arm and a leg, by the way. But never mind me, never mind what I'm going to be watching on October 31st. You guys out there, those guys that you see on social media, those guys on Twitter, those guys on Facebook, those guys on Instagram, those guys on YouTube, those guys who defend Gervonta Davis vigorously via social media. 24 hours a day. It's almost like these people don't have day jobs.
Ain't you got nothing better to do?
Because you're such a big fan of Gervonta Davis and you are so excited about this fight. If you can be there, then be there. Show up and show out. And if you can't be there for some reason, one reason or another, purchase the fight. And post a screenshot of your purchase, of your pay-per-view buy, since you support this kid so much.
Was it such a great fight?
Never mind what I'll be watching that night. It's not about me, it's about how much you support Gervonta Davis. Now's your chance. Show the world how much you support him, why don't you? Because now that the stage is set, and as it turns out, there can be fans in attendance, as many as 11,500 fight fans.
Right.
Because this is set to be his coming out party, his big pay-per-view debut, here's your chance to show how much you support this guy if you actually support him outside of arguments on social media.
Is that it?
Whilst you stream fights for free with your Fire Sticks. You no longer have to worry about Khabib versus Gaethje siphoning off any eyes away from Gervonta Davis's big pay-per-view debut, and they can actually have fans in attendance, so the stage is set. Let's see what happens.
Surely, Bob, there's been some interest from a UK broadcaster.
None. N-O-N-E. None. What does that tell you about the state of the sport? Meanwhile, every bit of Eddie's junk goes on Sky, and they make the poor fans shell out money to watch all of this stuff. Does Usyk and whoever, and Chisora, is that a pay-per-view fight? I mean, in which world is it a pay-per-view fight? The networks in the UK are just taking money from the boxing fans and they're not giving back. That should be free on television. A television network that is doing boxing should buy a Lomachenko Lopez fight. If you're into boxing, don't turn it down because you're not going to be able to monetize it. Those involved with boxing are money grubbers that just look to put on events where they can take money from the fans. Wake up. Wake up. Why are all these fights now on pay-per-view? And look at the difference in the States with ESPN, where you get all these terrific fights which don't cost the fans 5 cents. That's saving the sport. In other words, you've got to start putting events on for free to give fans the opportunity to watch these fights without going into their pocket. But over here in the States, people are out of work. The economy is in the shithouse because of this coronavirus. So what the hell are these networks reaching into the boxing fans' pocket week in, week out for fights that don't even belong on pay-per-view?
We're 3 weeks out from the fight, Bob. Is your gut feeling saying that it won't be on UK television, that fight?
I'm not going to give it to them for nothing. I'm not going to charge them a big, big price. But somebody's got to contact us, and because we've contacted everybody, and say, yes, we want to show it, and we'll pay a normal license fee for it.
I don't know that by the time that this video is uploaded, news will break that some UK broadcaster may have picked up the Lomachenko versus Lopez lightweight unification match. I don't know that by the time that this video is uploaded, that might change, though even if it did, it wouldn't take away from the point we're about to discuss here. The point that Bob Arum is making, that there really does seem to be a lot of fights ending up on pay-per-view that perhaps, given the circumstances, shouldn't be there. And you don't have to question whether or not Bob Arum means business when he says this, whether or not he's willing to put his money where his mouth is, because he just did. The Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez fight was originally set to be a pay-per-view, and that has since changed based on the circumstances. Now, you're not going to have to pay $80 to see that fight, and that is a higher quality fight than Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz or Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia.
And you won't have to pay $80 to see it.
Though I will admit, I would have gladly paid that $80 price tag to see it. That's right, as that fight is deserving of the fight fans' patronage, yet it does not ask so much of them at such a critical time in history, human history, as we transition out of this global pandemic. This is a fight that has all the intrigue a fight fan wants, a fight fan needs, for all the right reasons. The intrigue associated with this fight isn't based on whether or not a guy can make weight and how that might affect his performance, or how a guy who was involved in a car accident might be damaged goods, or he might not be, but you won't know till the night of the fight. All the intrigue associated with Lomachenko versus Lopez has everything to do with the fighter's ability to fight. It's a fight where you're not quite sure what's going to happen, and there's a chance that no matter what you decide, you could be wrong. That is the kind of intrigue that deserves the fight fans' patronage, and yet neither Top Rank or ESPN are asking the fight fans to fork over $80 to see that fight, because they know what's going on around the world.
But ideally, that is what you pay for.
The sizzle, the intrigue of not knowing, of the outcome not being a foregone conclusion. I think that a lot of these fights that really shouldn't be staged as pay-per-views end up as such because the fighters themselves have certain financial demands, and the only way to meet those demands is to stage a pay-per-view in the hopes that the fans will flip the bill.
That's it.
Perhaps the networks themselves don't want to put up the necessary finances to get a certain fighter in the ring, thus they will rely on the fans to flip the bill for them. I think that's more or less how some of these fights that shouldn't be pay-per-views end up being pay-per-views, and as a result of that, you see nominal numbers, nominal success, if you're lucky. Fighters aren't fighting on pay-per-view organically anymore because they're not grown organically anymore. You got promoters trying to convince you that a fighter has a certain following, or that a certain fight belongs on pay-per-view just because the promoter said so, when in reality, the fighter's market value doesn't actually line up with that fighter's financial demands. I mean, if you're gonna have those financial demands, those kinds of financial demands, to where the only way you can get at the kind of money you want to get at is by being on pay-per-view, it has to be based on something. It has to be based on something tangible, i.e. your marquee value, your market value, what money you generate.
It's gotta be based on that.
Otherwise, I'm sorry to say, that fighter doesn't belong on pay-per-view. We are seeing a cluster, a proliferation of pay-per-view fights going into the fall months that are questionable. It's questionable whether or not a fight like Spence versus Garcia belongs on pay-per-view. It's questionable whether or not a fight like Leo Santa Cruz versus Gervonta Davis belongs on pay-per-view. You gotta wonder that Bob Arum isn't touching on something very real here, that boxing can't thrive as a sport under these circumstances. They can't all be pay-per-views. Every halfway decent fight that involves some risk and some or one or two solid fighters can't be billed as a $80 pay-per-view to the fight fan. It's not going to help grow the sport. That's going to drive people away.
Wilder versus Ortiz 2 shouldn't have been a pay-per-view.
Neither should have Spence versus Mikey Garcia. That shouldn't have been a pay-per-view either.
Spence versus Danny Garcia shouldn't be a pay-per-view.
Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz shouldn't be a pay-per-view. But it is. And I think it's because some outfits rather treat every halfway decent fight, or every fight involving two nominally familiar fighters, like it's a goddamn cash grab.
You think that helps grow the sport of boxing?
Charging the fans an arm and a leg for fights that they weren't actually asking for? Is that going to actually help familiarize the populace with the fighters and help get those fighters exposure?
Organically.
So that they can grow a sizable following, a sizable audience, the way that they used to in previous eras of boxing. You think this is helping that along?
I don't.
Now, just in reference to Bob Arum's gripe, that no UK broadcaster has picked up the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight as of yet. I say this knowing that by the time this video is uploaded, that news could change, as news in the sport of boxing is very fluid, ever evolving, and ever changing. But you know, we talked about how DAZN is set to make their UK debut very soon. And they're talking about fights like Jacobs versus Rosado. I'm thinking to myself, for what it costs to put that event together, to stage that card, hold your horses, save your money, and dedicate those finances to buying the UK rights for Lomachenko versus Lopez. That's right, listen, you can't think that the fight fans over there in the UK are more interested in seeing Danny fucking Jacobs lock horns with Gabriel Rosado than they're interested to see Lomachenko versus Lopez. You'd have to be living under a rock, a very big rock. Let me tell you something, all right? You're John Skipper, you're Len Blavatnik, you're Eddie Hearn. And you see that neither BT Sport or Sky Sports, DAZN's main competitors in the UK market, you see that those two big names, they haven't picked up the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight. But you know that the fight fans in this part of the world want to see that fight. You deliver that fight to DAZN, because that's gonna move the fucking needle a lot more than Daniel Jacobs versus Gabriel Rosado.
Let me tell ya.
Think about it for a second. Think about it. That Jacobs versus Rosado fight, where's that set to take place? America, I would imagine, as I don't imagine there's a big audience over there in the UK climbing over each other to see that fight. That fight, in all likelihood, has the same time constraints that the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight would have, except the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight is a fight that the fight fans in that part of the world actually want to see. And Sky's not giving it to them, BT Sport's not giving it to them, so why don't you give it to them? Use this as an opportunity to give the fight fans over there something that Sky and BT Sport is not delivering to them. It's a golden opportunity, if you were a clever man. You want fights that are going to move the needle? This fight would move the needle over there in the UK a lot more than Jacobs versus Rosado. Now, I say these things knowing that by the time this video is uploaded, this news could change. There could be new developments, and by the time I upload this video, someone may have picked up the Lomachenko versus Lopez fight, some UK broadcaster. But if DAZN doesn't so decide to move on this, it is a missed opportunity. It would have been a missed opportunity for them, who are trying to debut in the UK very soon. This would have been a good start. I mean, I shouldn't be sitting here on fucking YouTube saying this. The people over there at DAZN, I'm sure, get paid a lot of money to come up with a lot of fucking ideas, and some fucking guy on YouTube shouldn't be ahead of the curve. They need to be all over this if they're not already. You deliver the fight fans in the UK what the other broadcasters, your competitors, are not delivering to them. That's the perfect way to make an impression.